Well, Donald Trump's press conference performance in Helsinki rises to and exceeds the threshold of high crimes and misdemeanors. It was nothing short of treasonous. Not only were Trump's comments imbecilic, he is wholly in the pocket of Putin. Now, none of those are my words. That is what former director of the CIA, John Brennan, said after the president's press conference today with Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump showed himself once again to be the weakest president who has ever had to confront a Russian leader or a Soviet leader. In President Trump's opening remarks, this is all he had to say about the cyber war that Vladimir Putin launched against the United States to attempt to control the outcome of the presidential election here.
I addressed directly with President Putin the issue of Russian interference in our elections. I felt this was a message best delivered in person. Spent a great deal of time talking about it, and President Putin may very well want to address it, and very strongly, because he feels very strongly about it, and he has an interesting idea.
It is hard to imagine a weaker statement by a president of the United States in that situation, but things got much worse when the questioning started. 2 Russian reporters were allowed to ask questions, and 2 American reporters. The Russian reporters were as servile as we have come to expect from them. The American reporters got President Trump to repeatedly humiliate and disgrace himself, even with an easy softball first question like this.
Mr. President, you tweeted this morning that it's U.S. foolishness, stupidity, and the Mueller probe that is responsible for the decline in U.S. relations with Russia. Do you hold Russia at all accountable for anything in particular? And if so, what would you consider them that they are responsible for?
Yes, I do. I hold both countries responsible. I think that the United States has been foolish. I think we've all been foolish. We should have had this dialogue a long time ago. A long time, frankly, before I got to office. And I think we're all to blame. But I do feel that we have both made some mistakes. I think that the probe is a disaster for our country. I think it's kept us apart. It's kept us separated. There was no collusion at all. Everybody knows it.
And with that, Donald Trump became the first American president in history to condemn the United States in fealty to a Russian president standing there beside him. Donald Trump just heard him say, I think that the United States has been foolish. But he would not dare then say the sentence, I think Russia has been foolish. He would not dare say those words. He would not dare say the sentence, I think President Putin has been foolish. Wouldn't dare say that. And it got worse.
For President Putin, if I could follow up as well, why should Americans and why should President Trump believe your statement that Russia did not intervene in the 2016 election, given the evidence that U.S. intelligence agencies have provided? And will you consider extraditing the 12 Russian officials that were indicted last week by a U.S. grand jury?
Well, I'm going to let the president answer the second part of that question. But as you know,
in the interest of time and your sanity, we will save you this imbecilic section of President Trump's comments. Suffice to say that it included his version of how he won the Electoral College and how impossibly difficult that is for a Republican candidate to do. And it ended with him saying, we ran a brilliant campaign, and that's why I'm president. Vladimir Putin, in turn, talked about the extradition of the 12 Russian military officers who Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller indicted on Friday, something President Trump did not even bring up in his private conversation with Vladimir Putin, according to President Trump's own summation of that private conversation. Vladimir Putin invited Robert Mueller to formally seek the extradition of those 12 Russian military officers. But then, of course, Vladimir Putin attached an impossible condition to that extradition, saying that Robert Mueller would have to share all of his information with Russian investigators and allow Russian investigators to question members of the CIA and the FBI. And that is exactly the kind of thing that can provoke a former CIA director like John Brennan to call the president's performance today, quote, nothing short of treasonous. The fact that Donald Trump publicly accepted that offer from Vladimir Putin, thought it was a great idea. Vladimir Putin is much smoother, much more eloquent than Donald Trump, who is, of course, the least eloquent president of a major power in the world. But Vladimir Putin is not nearly as smart as any of the smoother leaders of the G7 and other major countries in the world. And Vladimir Putin proved that when he admitted that he wanted Donald Trump to win the presidency and that he did indeed direct his government to help Donald Trump win the presidency. Donald Trump said there wouldn't be a Perry Mason moment in his private meeting with Vladimir Putin, and I'm sure there wasn't. But the Perry Mason moment, as Donald Trump describes it, did come today when Vladimir Putin revealed in public the smoking gun in his hand in response to a question by Jeff Mason of Reuters, in which the audio was a bit muted at first, but it's all there.
Did you want President Trump to win the election, and did you direct any of your officials to help him do that?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Because he talked about bringing the U.S.-Russia relationship back to normal.
You just heard Vladimir Putin asked, did you want President Trump to win, and did you direct any of your officials to help him win? And Vladimir Putin said, yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yes to both of those things. Yes to I wanted Donald Trump to win the election, and yes to I directed officials to help him do that. And that's exactly what Robert Mueller indicted 12 Russian military officers for on Friday. There are very few foreign leaders who can be tricked into saying they had a preference in an American presidential election. But the former KGB agent, who probably believes his own press about how brilliant he is, made that simple mistake today. And standing beside the Russian president when he said that today was Putin's prize, Donald Trump, the man Putin wanted to be president of the United States, the man Putin did everything he could to help become president of the United States, and how perfect a prize he was today.
Just now, President Putin denied having anything to do with the election interference in 2016. Every U.S. intelligence agency has concluded that Russia did. My first question for you, sir, is who do you believe? My second question is, would you now, with the whole world watching, tell President Putin, would you denounce what happened in 2016, and would you warn him to never do it again?
So let me just say that we have two thoughts. You have groups that are wondering why the FBI never took the server. Haven't they taken the server? Why was the FBI told to leave the office of the Democratic National Committee? I've been wondering that. I've been asking that for months and months, and I've been tweeting it out and calling it out on social media. Where is the server? I want to know, where is the server, and what is the server saying? With that being said, all I can do is ask the question. My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be. So I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
With the whole world watching, would you denounce what happened in 2016, and would you warn Putin not to do it again? And President Trump does not denounce what happened in 2016. He does not dare warn Putin not to do anything. The Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coates, did not say that he thinks that Russia did it. He says he knows that Russia did it. And last week, this is what Dan Coates said the president should say to Vladimir Putin.
My message would be, we know what you're doing, and we know you know what you're doing and what we are doing. We know you run the shop. We know you're making the decisions. You can't pass it off to, oh, that's some hacker down somewhere where we don't know. We know what you do, and so you make the choice. But if you want to stay in this tit for tat, we're going to beat you.
Today, Donald Trump's talking points were the same as the Russian president's talking points, and that is how much Russia won in its cyber invasion of the United States in 2016. Russia won an American president who admires the Russian president and who echoes the Russian president. The last question of the press conference made perfect sense and was inconceivable at any moment in history prior to the Trump presidency.
Sir, does the Russian government have any compromising material on President Trump or his family?
And Vladimir Putin gave an answer that was 220 words long, and nowhere in that answer did Vladimir Putin say no. He never said, no, we do not have any compromising material on President Trump or his family. Instead, Vladimir Putin told a lie that he did not know who Donald Trump was when Donald Trump visited Moscow with his beauty pageant. David Corn will join us later with details on that particular Putin lie. And even though that last question was not directed at President Trump desperately wanted to get the last word about any compromising material that Vladimir Putin might have on him.
Well, please just disregard these issues and don't think about this anymore again.
And I have to say, if they had it, it would have been out long ago.
And as you will hear later in this program, intelligence officials disagree with that. If Vladimir Putin had compromising information on Donald Trump or his family, of course, he would keep it as his little secret with Donald Trump so that he could control Donald Trump, especially in one-on-one meetings with Donald Trump. And then President Trump threw in a last line today to end the press conference with a Trumpian dash of incoherence.
And if anybody watched Peter Strzok testify over the last couple of days, and I was in Brussels watching it, it was a disgrace to the FBI, it was a disgrace to our country, and you would say that was a total witch hunt. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
And so the final three words of the president's summit with Vladimir Putin were total witch hunt. Joining us now are Wendy Sherman, former Undersecretary of State in the Obama administration. She is an MSNBC Global Affairs contributor. Also with us, Larry Pfeiffer, former CIA Chief of Staff and a former director of the Obama White House Situation Room. He's currently director of the Hayden Center. And Ambassador Sherman, these are challenging nights for programs like this because we really are tonight the first draft of history, and this was a historic day. With your experience, I simply want to give you an open opportunity to react to what you saw today.
Well, I think I felt as most have today, including Republicans and Fox News commentators, that this was an extraordinary and really devastating and in many ways disgraceful press conference. We learned what I think we've known but didn't know on a global stage, and that is President Trump is not on America's team. He may not even be on Vladimir Putin's team. He's on his own team, and he's either just incredibly incompetent, incredibly insecure about his legitimacy, or on the hook to Vladimir Putin, or all three. Because we saw today a man who really could not get his act together, was all over the place, and made the United States the equivalent of Russia, an aggressor in the world, and certainly an aggressor in Ukraine and all parts of the world, and of great concern to all of Europe and to our allies, or what have been our allies in Europe for so long. NATO is in part about Russian aggression and our concerns about it, protecting our largest trading partners. Donald Trump is always about the money. There is no money in trade with Russia. So if there's any money involved here, it's money laundering through real estate, and that's the hook. I have no idea. What I do know is that Americans need to stand up, speak out. I was glad to hear some voices that we haven't heard before, but we have to keep our country secure. And as we go to the 2018 elections, I hope that the U.S. Congress will insist that someone be appointed to make sure that we have secure election machines and election voting processes. that we really understand that cyber warfare is now the weapon of choice of Russia, and that we put all of our weight behind it. But it'll take citizens' voices speaking up, maybe in phone calls to their members of Congress, maybe in the streets, maybe on the press. But it's time to speak up and speak out.
Larry Pfeiffer, the president specifically mentioned Dan Coats today, and he misstated Dan Coates' position. He said that Dan Coates thinks that it's Russia. Dan Coates has made it very clear publicly that he knows that it's Russia, and those are the words he used last week in terms of who actually did the attack on our electoral system. And Dan Coates actually then issued a statement after the president's comments today saying, reiterating what he has said before. Where does this leave the president's national security advisors, in particular Dan Coates?
Well, Lawrence, the situation with Dan Coates, while on the one hand I appreciate him coming out late this afternoon with a statement reemphasizing the findings of the intelligence community assessment, I believe that Donald Trump standing there next to our number one adversary, the target of our counterintelligence investigation into Russian meddling in our election, Russian interference in our election, was a complete repudiation of the very organization and the people that Dan Coates leads. And so earlier today, I called for Dan Coates to resign in protest. I believe we've reached a point where continuing to reemphasize the validity of the IC assessment that, as you indicated earlier today, or early in your conversation, has been almost proven with the indictments that came out last week, is just not enough. And I believe somebody with Dan Coates' credibility, with his gravitas, with his reputation, if he were to resign or perhaps even threaten to resign, we could at least get a more focused, higher level conversation going on this very topic. At a minimum, it would force a confirmation hearing for a new individual that would be nominated. And I'm confident, given some of the hearings we've had out of Congress in recent times, that will be quite an illuminating, quite a controversial event.
Ambassador Sherman, I think many people are surprised that there hasn't been a principled resignation from the Trump administration at any point. There have been a lot of firings, but no principled resignations. And to Larry's point, how would that advance the situation? Meaning Dan Coates seems to be making clear sense and seems to be willing to publicly make statements that contradict the president on a day like today. Would a new person chosen by Donald Trump at this point possibly be as solid a performer, publicly at least, as Dan Coates has been?
I think this is a very tough call, and I appreciate what Larry has suggested here. I am concerned, however, that whoever would come next would be someone who would rubber stamp exactly what Donald Trump wants to hear, because that's the kind of nominee he would likely to put up to do this job. I agree that a hearing might illuminate much to us, but we might find ourselves in a worse circumstance. I understand that Dan Coates put out that statement this afternoon without regard to the White House. They didn't sign off on it. He didn't ask for permission. And I think he did the right thing, which is don't ask for permission. You may have to ask for forgiveness. And maybe he was just testing to see whether the president would leave him his